How you doing, guys? Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. We sure do live in interesting times. So obviously the increased tensions, we're well past tensions, but the increased escalation in violence and conflict, specifically in the Middle East right now, I think has really put us in a inflection point. I think I already made a video a few days before all this detailing that the next 90 days would be crazy, I think was the word I used. And while I was mostly referring to financially, obviously increased escalations in what was already, in my belief, World War III, the beginnings of it anyway, is wrapped up in all that too. So this is more of what I was expecting coming to fruition. But specifically, I think we're at a major turning point, inflection point with regards to the decision that's about to be made regarding actually storming, ground invasion, whatever you want to call it, the Gaza Strip by Israel. And there's so many things at play here. Obviously they want to do it, but we're seeing multiple other countries coming out, and including China, and wagging their finger and being like, don't you guys do anything stupid now, using their very understated kind of diplomatic style. Let me read you what China says. The Chinese foreign minister said that the Palestinian question is at the core of the Middle East issue, and the crux is that justice has eluded the Palestinians for too long. So obviously they're siding with the Palestinians. The current conflict showed again in an extremely brutal way the solution to the Palestinian question lies in resuming genuine peace talks as soon as possible. And realizing the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. China calls for an international peace conference with greater authority and impact as soon as possible to galvanize a more broad-based international consensus with a two-state solution serving as its basis, and formulate a timetable and roadmap to that end. So the translation, you could say, is follow through on your threats to enter Gaza, and we will backstop support provided by Iran and Russia to Hezbollah and the Palestinians. So, and this is coming from Vox Day too, he says, the Global Times made it even more explicit. Quote, China's top diplomat Wang Yi said Israel's actions have gone beyond the scope of self-defense, expressing concerns about the escalating Israel-Palestinian conflict as Israel ordered 1 million people from the northern part of Gaza to evacuate within 24 hours, blah, 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 as it prepared for a ground assault. But they're in an interesting position. So we know already that we have a massive kind of axis, if you want to call it that, of potentially anyways. It hasn't really coagulated or coalesced into anything specific directed at any one goal. But, obviously Iran, China, Russia, potentially even countries like Pakistan, another nuclear power, are all potentially on one side of this. And then you have Israel in a position where basically it's just the United States. NATO-ish, but NATO is the United States for all practical intents and purposes when we're talking about going up against a conflict like that, the force projection with aircraft carriers and all that, it's the United States. And what we're willing to do makes a difference. So this isn't going to get any better for them. Regardless of what anyone says out there about, oh, China's collapsing, the West is in a massive state of decline. Our currency is the weapon. Forget what you want about, or say what you want about the aircraft carriers, whatever. The only reason that all exists is because of the petrodollar, and the clock is ticking in a big way on that. And this might be, if Israel sees this as their last chance, all these countries I mentioned, and then you add in all the different Arab countries, Israel is massively, massively outnumbered. And this is not, I'm not making value statement a claim either way about which side is right or wrong. I'm just saying these are the stats. There are hundreds of millions of potential soldiers, whatever, people on one side of this, and then you have Israel on the other. And the only backstop right now, the only thing that's kept that from being complete blowout, is the fact that the United States has always been on the side of Israel, at least on paper. But we've already, the West and even the United States has sent a ton of money already to the Ukraine conflict, which has now switched immediately to Israel. Israel may still see this as their last chance, even if it's not good to potentially go up against China, Iran, Russia. If they wait 10, 15 more years, having the U.S. on their side isn't going to mean much. And it might not mean enough now, but so they could see this as their last chance to really get in there and maybe have China, Russia, Iran, maybe not decide to go ham on them, knowing that the United States military is still, even in our diminished capacity, still, one of the greatest destructive forces in the history of the world, if not the most. If you outside of a nuclear arsenal, it certainly is still, and especially with force projection. The ability for us to get troops and materiel and whatever over there into anywhere in the world is super outmatches any other country. But they're already there, so to speak, too. And one of the scariest things about this is that both Biden and I think Secretary Treasury Yellen have both come out and said, yeah, we can afford 2 wars. We can afford to support both Ukraine and Israel. We can afford, which is absolute nonsense. But I guess if you're spending money you don't have, you might as well spend all of it. And that's why I've always known, it's just another proof, another nail in the coffin of the dollar. Knowing that they're just willing, able, in fact, to feel compelled, it seems like, to just create as many dollars as is necessary, send hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars that we already do not have to fight other people's wars. And I've always said that is just like Gregory Maynard always says, the only goal, the only real weapon that central banks have is to be the buyer and lender of last resort. Their only weapon. You can talk about interest rates, whatever. Their only real weapon is creating more money. And that's why they're doing that. The only alternative would be to stop, let the economic contractions take over, have money literally disappear from existence, and them not even be able to pay the military or pay the police or pay the welfare. And that's why I've always known that that's not going to happen, at least not in any major long-term way. That as soon as we start to see that contraction take over, and I believe it will, there's always a chance they could go right into the insane money printing because of war. That's the one kind of, I don't want to say black swan, because war's not a black swan, but it's the one unknown in this, is that they might, if they start insane money printing just to fund 2 wars before we even get any sort of crash, then we could go right into the hyperinflation. That's why I think it's not financial advice, but that's why I think it would be a good idea to already have gold and silver or any physical tangible property that you can. But I've always thought there's a huge, huge percent chance of there being a crash first in the markets, in real estate, in just the economy in general, where the hollow situation that we've had for years is exposed. The whole thing starts to implode, and then they begin to pump it back up the only way they can, by hitting the blast off button. Because, like I said, the only alternative is to no longer have any money, to have it literally disappear in a debt contraction implosion. And they're not going to do that, especially not when there's 2 wars or World War III or whatever. It's just that scenario is just so unlikely to me that I still have yet to see someone explain to me how that is a real possibility. But if it were, I honestly think it would be far, far worse. It would be better long term, maybe, if the country even survived. But if they truly let the implosion take over, like literally, it would be a bad day in Bosnia, as the man says, in the U.S. in a matter of months. There would be no money, and everything would be unavailable. But the flip side of that is when there's infinite money, it has about the same value as when there's no money, which is nothing. But that's the route they're going to go, and that's why I think that Israel might see this. Like, it's just impossible that they don't see the writing on the wall. And that's why I think that there's a very good likelihood that they may see this as their last chance to really get anything done while the U.S. still has some oomph in it. It's still feared, still super powerful military, whatever. They're willing to see us use the last bit of purchasing power that the dollar has on their goals. Absolutely. And it seems like most of the conservatives, at least in the U.S., feel the same way, that they're willing to let these other countries, specifically Israel, be the hills for us to die on, which is unfortunate. And like I've said so many times, this has nothing to do with any of that. It just has to do with the fact that we are absolutely in a horrible position economically. There is zero chance that this debt can be repaid. And they're literally writing IOUs with future generations of Americans that have no ability to pay it off. So, I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think Israel is going to blink and look at, facing attacks by Iran and as being not worth it? Or do you think they're going to say, you know what, we either face them all now with America, or we face several billion potentially Muslim people in 20, 30 years without America, maybe even 10 or 15 years. So I think that they'll probably decide to go for it, unfortunately, and that'll see further escalation. So I am not changing my prediction of craziness before the end of the year. It's going to get wild. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll talk to you soon. But no matter how wild it gets, you know that if you buy the Rule the Wasteland Survival Fishing Kit, you are guaranteed to survive. And if you do not survive, I will give you a full refund. Links in the description.